Hey, what's going on everybody? It's Brandon and welcome back to Marotta Media. Another long break in between videos, just had a lot going on like I always say. And even though I'm late on this one, in today's review I will be discussing what is probably my most anticipated movie of 2021, Dune. Dune is an adaptation of Frank Herbert's 1965 classic sci-fi novel, and Dune tells the story of the noble Atreides family and other royal families throughout the galaxy as they fight over a valuable element known as the spice on the planet Arrakis. Dune was directed by Denis Villenueve, who is one of the best directors working today, in my honest opinion. He's directed several fantastic movies, Prisoners, Arrival, Sicario, and he also directed one of my favorite sci-fi movies ever made, Blade Runner 2049, a movie that I think is perfect in every single way. And honestly, I think it's better than the original. Not saying that the original Blade Runner is bad, because it's fantastic, but 2049 is 10 steps above it. Now, I have not read the book Dune, but I know that it's a pretty grand sci-fi story. So I feel like it was only right to hire Villeneuve to direct this movie, because he just seems like the right guy for it. There's been other attempts to adapt Dune to the big screen and even the small screen. David Lynch directed his own version of Dune in 1984 to mixed results. I personally never saw it. I just didn't really have any interest in it. It didn't look that great. There was also a mini-series in 2000, but I honestly didn't even know that was a thing until I watched this movie. But with Denis Villeneuve's version of Dune, there should be absolutely no mixed reception of it, because this movie is fucking amazing. Dune is one of the most ambitious movies I think that I have ever seen. And I mean that just in terms of its scale. This movie just feels so grand and huge and just larger than life. Just the overall scope of this movie just feels so incredible. There are several shots in this movie that consist of a ship landing or taking off, and just those shots alone mesmerized me. I can't tell you why. I think it was just because the overall vision that Villeneuve had for this movie and the way he executed it is just perfection. But I think another reason that just those simple shots mesmerized me as much as they did was the sound design. Just the sound of them taking off is incredible. The way it surrounds you. It's almost as if the ship itself is just outside. But I think the reason that it was so great to me is because I watched this movie in IMAX, and I personally do not think there is any other way to watch it. This is absolutely a film that was made for the theater experience. I'm sorry, if you watch this movie on HBO Max for the first time, then you're doing it so wrong, man. Like, really? Like, I don't even know what to say to you. That's a very pompous statement, but it's absolutely true. Dune has a flurry of different characters. And honestly, all of them I found to be incredibly interesting, and I got attached to them very quickly. I've seen criticisms of this movie saying that the characters aren't interesting and there's no character development, but I think the reason for that, in fact, I don't think I know the reason for that, is because this is just part one of the Dune story. It even says in the opening title card, Dune Part 1. But I think that this movie did have character development, namely by Paul Atreides, the main character played by Timothée Chalamet. I honestly think he's a completely different guy by the time this movie ended, and his character development isn't even completed yet. Now, while I do love the characters in this movie, it's not really about them. Dune is more of a movie about world building. And I love movies that have great world building, and Dune hit the nail on the head. I was absolutely captivated. Some of the locations were so beautiful, but also very foreign. You know, I'm kind of a simple person. I don't travel much. I've only been to 2 countries in my life. So as a result, the locations in this movie, to me at least, look like they could have been another planet. The main planet this movie takes place on, Arrakis, was filmed primarily in Jordan, and the Atreides homeworld Caladan was shot primarily in Norway. And just the shots that they got in both locations were absolutely stunning. Both look like absolutely beautiful countries in their own way. But one thing that really intrigued me about Dune is that this movie takes place in the distant future. I think the year is like 10,000 something. But the way that these civilizations are modeled, their technology seems very primitive. It seems almost like they're some sort of ancient civilization. Almost like an ancient civilization that you would see in Egypt. At least that's what it reminded me of. But it's funny to me because they have these huge high-tech ships that are meant for galactic travel where they can just travel from planet to planet. But yet there's no technology such as computers or robots. Things that you would expect people like this to have in the distant future. I've seen videos explaining why there aren't anything like that in Dune, but I'm not going to get into that because I'm not here to explain how this world operates, but it was so interesting to me to have civilizations that live very far into the future, yet they feel very ancient. Dune also has what might be my favorite score of the year. Hans Zimmer was the composer behind this film's music, and he absolutely crushed it. If I remember correctly, I believe that he turned down working with the longtime collaborator Christopher Nolan on Tenet to work on this movie. And I think that worked out pretty great for all sides because Tenet ended up being scored by Ludwig Göransson, and I absolutely love that movie's score. But I think Hans Zimmer absolutely made the right choice here, and I really believe he will get nominated and possibly win an Oscar for Best Original Score. The score is so epic in its build-up. The music itself also feels very ancient, like with the pounding of these very old-sounding drums. And on my particular favorite song of the entire movie, Paul's Dream, there's a woman singing on it. I believe the song is featured in the trailer, but just the way she's singing sounds very... How do I put this? Kind of like a very old adventure movie that takes place primarily in like the Sahara Desert. If you've seen the movie, you probably know what I mean. Just that song playing, I picture people riding through the desert on camels' backs while the sun is setting behind them. And while Dune is a very expository film focused on building this world, it has its fair share of action too. And let me tell you, the first really big action scene where the Atreides compound is infiltrated by their enemies, my jaw was on the floor. There were explosions happening everywhere and people fighting on the ground. And I don't mean an overabundance of explosions like in a Michael Bay movie. The explosions in Dune actually served a purpose. You felt like there were actual stakes to this battle with everything burning down around them. But it's not just that scene, because Dune is just a visually stunning film. Like one scene that stands out to me, the first time we see a sandworm, it blew my mind. The sandworms being the native creatures to Arrakis, and their job is to protect the spice. But these things are so huge. The first time we see one, it devours this gigantic vehicle that the Atreides family has as they're scouting the desert for spice. And this vehicle is huge. It's probably about the size of a skyscraper. And this sandworm just eats it like it's absolutely nothing. And it's so fucking beautiful. But the visuals as a whole are just fantastic. In fact, there were a lot of moments in this movie that reminded me of Star Wars. But that's kind of funny because Dune itself was one of the main inspirations for Star Wars. Shots of ships taking off or shots of planets from space with ships passing by. But the reason the visuals are so good is just because this movie has incredible cinematography. There are several frames of Dune that could be a painting that you could just hang on your wall. They really try to show you as much as they can. They don't just show you a few characters standing there. They try to show you the characters as well as everything behind them, and they knock it out of the park every single time. Now, one of the last things I wanted to talk about here is this movie's ending. Because this is what I've seen people say is the worst part of this movie, is the way it ends. I've heard a lot of people say that Dune just ends abruptly and people weren't expecting it to, but I absolutely disagree. Because to me, the point where this movie began to end was fairly obvious. But without getting into spoilers, there's a conflict where Paul needs to prove himself. And when he does, he walks into the desert and talks about how his future is out there. So he tags along with the Fremen, who are the locals to Arrakis. And even Zendaya, who plays one of the Fremen, says, "This is only the beginning." and they walk away and this epic song starts playing and the credits roll. So I really don't know what people are talking about when they say that Dune just ended abruptly and they weren't expecting it. I honestly feel like people were just looking for something to complain about, because there's not much to complain about with this movie. But I think the reason that a lot of people didn't like the way it ended is because they did not realize that this was only part 1. But it even says Dune Part 1 right at the beginning with the opening title card. But at the time I saw this movie, I was like, what is Warner Brothers waiting for? They need to greenlight Part 2 immediately. But luckily, after this movie's opening weekend, Part 2 was officially greenlit, and we're getting it in October of 2023. And to tell you the truth, that's a lot sooner than I was expecting it. I was expecting at least 3 or 4 years, but we only have to wait 2, and I cannot wait for it. But in the end, guys, Dune was just as good as I was hoping it would be. This film is 2.5 hours long, but it just flew by. I was so entertained by it. The characters are fantastic. The acting by all is great. I didn't even really mention that, because this movie has a lot of big stars in it. Timothée Chalamet, Zendaya, Jason Momoa, Josh Brolin, Rebecca Ferguson, and Oscar Isaac. Everybody in this movie fits their character so well, and their acting is sublime. The visuals, the cinematography, Denis Villeneuve's direction, and just overall vision. You could tell that this story is very meaningful to him, and he did a phenomenal job bringing it to the big screen. This movie has been out for a while, so it will not be around much longer, but if you can, do yourself a favor and go see this movie on the biggest screen you can. If you watch this movie on your 40-inch television for the first time, then you probably did not get nearly as great of an experience as I did watching this film. Dune is one of the best movies of the year and might be my personal favorite movie of the year. And overall, I'm gonna give Dune a 9 out of 10. I know that may seem a bit anticlimactic after I just spent all that time praising it, but that is a very, very high 9. I might need to see it again, because I really feel that this movie could be a 10 in the future. Hey everybody, thank you so much for watching my review of Dune. If you guys saw this movie, then let me know what you thought about it. Did you love it, or did you hate it for some reason? Because I refuse to believe anyone did. If you guys like this review, then be sure to hit that thumbs up, and do not forget to subscribe. If you want to see my past reviews, I'll link those right over here. Other than that, I hope you all have a tremendous rest of your day, and I will see you all next time.